Hello and welcome to OK Listen podcast with myself, Scott Mills and Petra. Just before we start, this has taken us about 5 takes just to get going because of Petra's inability to record.
One would say it's perfectionism.
But basically, we thought we'd just give a quick recap on how we're going to structure these podcasts going forward in the next few weeks.
Each of us, we both have topics that we really care about, I guess. And we decided to each episode is going to be dedicated to a topic. And the person doing the topic is going to do some research on it and kind of tell the other person about it, and we can discuss, because I think I have knowledge that you don't have and vice versa.
Yes.
So we can just share.
And personal experiences.
Exactly.
So we're going to get into it now, guys.
Yeah, let me educate you. Today's episode is going to be on attachment theory, or attachment styles, or more, it's attachment theory.
Like Harry Styles.
God, please don't.
Sorry.
Okay, first of all, it sounds like in school. What do you know about attachment theories? Any idea?
I feel like it's an emotional bond that you forge when you grow up, and it starts from there, and then it's deeply rooted into you as you go into adult life. And it's how you share sort of relationships with people, whether it be friends, family, or partners going forward. And it's based on your past experiences as a child.
Do you want to do this episode?
Am I close?
Yeah, you are close. Are you reading my notes?
It's just over the shoulder.
Yeah. No, but you're right. So attachment theory is basically what you said. So it's kind of the bond that is created between a child and their primary caregiver. So it could be, majority of the time, it's the mom. And it's mainly the infant and then the caregiver. Interestingly, what I'm going to get into as well is that you can change your attachment styles throughout your life. So it really depends on who you surround yourself with, who you're in a relationship with, and so on. So it can change. But the main, attachment comes from your childhood, as you said. And it definitely seeps into our adulthood or in every relationship that we have. So it doesn't have to be just intimate. So it doesn't have to be just, relationships with partners or romantic relationships. It's really relationships with anyone and everyone. There's a lot of things about these attachment styles that I definitely am not an expert on. So I'm just going to preface that again.
That's where I come in.
I'm going to preface that again, that this is just research, a couple of years of me just reading up on the topic and just our personal experiences. So interestingly, on the website that is describing attachment theory, only John Bowlby, I guess.
Yeah, legend of the subject.
Sure, Scott has no idea who that is.
I do. I have a framed picture of him in my bedroom.
Oh, that's him. Yeah. Above your bed?
Yeah.
Right. Got it.
The OG. The ledge.
Yeah, so he's the one mainly mentioned on the websites about attachment theories, but I should give a shout out to, the female person in this as well, because there's another one called Mary Ainsworth, and she was legend. Yeah, she was another pioneer in attachment theory. So both of them. Don't know about her which years, but John Bowlby was in the 1950s and 1960s. So I guess it's really important to keep in mind that all the theory is just, it's evolving. We are a different generation to previous generations, so it could well be that some of these things are a bit outdated. But honestly, they keep, they are being updated all the time. So the majority of things should be right. Just saying.
Bit of perfectionism coming through there.
Bit of perfectionism, yeah, a little bit. Also, one thing to mention about attachment theories is that it's not necessarily just one bond. So it's not like, for example, a child has a bond with their mother or with their caregiver, and then that's the only bond that they have. They can have different bonds with different kinds of people. So for example, if you think about it, I'm going to get into your attachment style, what I think it is, but if you think about it, you will probably have a different relationship with different kinds of people. So it doesn't mean that once you develop your primary attachment style that you can't have a different one with other people.
Quick question. Mm-hmm. Can you get attachment bonds to objects, like beer or food or football or
that's called addiction.
Oh right. Maybe I should see someone about that.
Maybe about a couple of those things actually from that list. combined together.
I'm sorry, Mum.
Saturdays, the Chelsea crew. Anyway, so interestingly, attachment doesn't have to be reciprocal, and it is possible for one person to be attached to another without it being reciprocated.
Yeah.
One really interesting thing was they did an experiment, so John Bowlby and his colleague, don't remember his name, but they did a experiment about these bonds with children. And what they did was they put children and their parents in a room, and then the parents would leave the child, and the child would be in distress because the parent left.
I think I've heard of that one actually
Could be.
when I've studied psychology.
Could be. So they left the child, it was in distress, and there were some other theories that thought that there are some other soothing, I guess, styles for the child to kind of forget about this, about them missing the parents. So for example, another scientist thought that they could potentially give the child food and they would forget about the parent. Well, it doesn't work that way. So the child is in distress, and it really depends on the relationship with the caregiver, but also how the caregiver is going to react to the child being in distress, and that kind of creates the bond. So what I mean by that is, and again, it's going to make more sense a bit later when I explain the styles, but what that could mean, for example, if the child is screaming, if the child is, clearly upset and the parent doesn't give it attention, it's going to be something else when the parent comes in and soothes the child. And that's how the bond is created. But again, let me just get into the styles and then you'll understand better.
Got it.
So again, why are they so important? As we said, like they really seep into our everyday life. And if a healthy bond cannot be established during the baby's early, phase, it can lead to really like emotional problems later on, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Oh, and also I wrote down again, interesting. I only have these in romantic relationships, these bonds, or with people that I see as my kind of really important figures in my life. With friends, I don't have these bonds at all. Or like not the bonds, I don't have these attachment styles. They're so different.
So like people you look up to? Or
people that kind of, so for example, I had this with my previous line manager.
Yeah.
Because she was such a kind of replacing the mother figure in my life, but I'll get into it. So
because I'm your idol, you might,
Yeah, sure. Anyway.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, of course. So what are the 4 attachment styles? Do you know?
I know avoidant. There's 4. And then I don't know the rest.
Okay. So 4 attachment styles, and there are some deviations or like combinations. It doesn't necessarily mean that you fit into one or the other. The main ones are a secure attachment, which I tend to call the golden jackpot, and I'll explain later. Then there is the avoidant, which is a dismissive, also called. Then there is the anxious-preoccupied, which would be me in majority of cases. And then the fearful avoidant. So let me get into each of them. The secure attachment, aka golden jackpot, about 56% of the population has a secure attachment style. Again, these numbers are from the 80s, so who knows?
I'm assuming this is called the golden jackpot because it's the one that everyone wants in an ideal world.
Everyone wants this.
Where it's like, everything's ideal and sort of perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you would want to be secure, of course. And what that means is, so when you have a secure attachment style, it refers to the ability to form secure, loving relationships with others. And securely attached people can trust others and be trusted. They can love and accept love and get close to others with relative ease. So they're also not afraid of intimacy, nor do they feel panicked when their partners need time or space away from them, and they're able to depend on others without becoming totally dependent. My next bullet point is, sounds like a fucking nightmare. Why I say that? Because in me personally, because I'm not a securely attached person, I'm an anxious, preoccupied one. For me, it's I always thought that I'm just not confident to trust and kind of be like, oh yeah, I know that you love me. Like I always thought that it's a confidence thing. Like I don't want to toot my own horn and be just like, oh yeah, I know that you love me. And then for you to be like, no,
you don't want to be
actually.
arrogant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, so I thought it's a confidence thing, but it turns out it's not. It's just like, I don't want to admit it. I know. I don't want to admit it because what if it's not true and I'm going to be left?
Yeah,
But
that's
it's going to be
very
explained.
pessimistic.
I know.
Outlook.
That's me.
That's
Hashtag
your
stay negative.
That's your attachment.
That's my attachment. But yeah, so it sounds like a nightmare for me to trust other people.
Which isn't the best.
Which is
sort
great
of way
because
to
we are
approach it.
celebrating our anniversary.
Yeah. So,
Great. But yeah,
all that time she hasn't trusted you
no, that's
to
not
get
true.
the right crisps.
No, that's not true. A securely attached child was always loved, cared for, and their needs were always met. I wrote down what that means is that when they were in distress, for example, crying, the primary caregiver was there to soothe them or respond to their state, which then leads to this person growing up being secure and not fear abandonment, and they trust their needs will be met one way or another. So even if these people, for example, they end up in a relationship with someone and then let's say the other person breaks up with them, they are not in distress because they're like, oh, okay, I mean, it sucks, but I'm good on my own. Like, I know if this didn't work out, there's a reason for it and I'm going to move on and there's going to be something better out there for me or someone more suitable for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a bit too positive for me.
Well, yeah, but it just means that you know that you're good on your own.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. Everyone probably wants that. But
Yeah.
like when you've got quite a negative sort of outlook on stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to think like that, I think, for people.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not to put anyone in a box. Like, there may be securely attached people who don't think like that. But at the same time, I don't think, compared to other attachment styles, they wouldn't see it at the end as the end of the world, or they wouldn't think, oh my God, I'm so, shitty, it's all my fault, and so on. So that's the beauty of being securely attached. Cool. Let's move on to avoidant or dismissive. So this is about 25% of the population.
Shout out to you guys.
Oh God, do you need a hug? During the
Steve!
No.
Steve, where are you?
No, do you need, honestly, if you're avoidant, God, do you need a hug? Because...
I'm here for you.
Exactly. Well, actually not me, because it's not a good combination with anxious attachment, but I'll explain. So, avoidant or dismissive. So children who have who grew up basically under the avoidance style or with the avoidance style, they have learned to accept that their emotional needs are likely to remain unmet and continue to grow up feeling unloved and insignificant. They often struggle with expressing their feelings and find it hard understanding emotions. When they are adults, they tend to avoid intimate relationships. So it doesn't mean that they don't have them. It just means that if someone starts getting too close, they just pull away.
Pull back.
Yeah, because they're really afraid that
they're going to get hurt.
They're going to get hurt, but also they just learn to...
It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah. And also, I think it's not mainly about the hurt. It's more about, like, they just don't believe that this person can love them. So they always say, like, oh, I'm better off alone. There's mostly these, like, fuck boys and fuck girls. What you saying? Players.
All the same. We'll put them in the box.
Players. Yeah, that's true. Not all of them are avoidant, but...
Players.
Anyway.
Players like Eden Hazard.
Moving on.
Right,
in order to cope with such parenting, the children, so the avoidants, so children who have an avoidant attachment have learned that in order to avoid distance and have the best chance of proximity to their carer, they should deny and or repress their emotional needs. So, for example, they minimize their attachment behavior and become, like, just isolated. This can be seen as a flight strategy. So what that means that, for example, again...
Fight or flight.
Yeah. So they wouldn't fight, they would just flight. So with the example of a child crying, what that would mean is when they see that they are crying and they're not getting the attention from the caregiver, they would just soothe themselves. But that, listen, it sounds great. Like, it sounds great that the child can take care of itself, but then they grow up thinking that nobody will ever help them, so they have to help themselves. So then when someone is starting to show any signs of intimacy or just, like, proximity, they just pull back because they're like, what is this? I don't like this. Stop. You know what I mean?
Get off me.
Get off me. Exactly. Again, as I said, like, it's often misunderstood because these people still want to be loved. They're just so scared to let people in as they learn to care for themselves and not to trust anyone in order to protect themselves. So It's not like they're unlovable. They're just, just hard to love.
They're just,
Sorry.
hard to accept love.
Yeah. So typical avoidant attachment presentation. So what they do is detachment in relationships, excessive independence, disappearing into a bubble, eating disorders, interestingly, self-harm and depression, and etc. Because it makes sense. If you always feel like nobody's going to ever love you and you're insignificant, then of course you're fucking depressed.
But it can change.
Can change,
It's not the...
For some reason, I don't want anyone out there judging me, but I will say this. For some reason, every time I see avoidant or dismissive attachment, you know who I think of?
You?
No.
Oh.
Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, right. No, that was a curveball. Didn't even think of that.
Yeah, because I have this scene in my head from the movie.
Never seen it, so I can't comment.
All right.
I'm only interested in Brokeback Mountain and
Neither have I.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Did I say that? No, but in the movie, basically, I don't know which one out of the million. There is a scene when he's a child and his mom's, I think, like
Spoilers.
new partner. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
His mom's new partner, I think, he abuses him, like physically abuses him, and just like puts cigarettes out on his body. That would be kind of him, shutting down, being dismissive. Yeah.
It makes sense.
And then becoming kind of abusive. I said that. Anyway, now
Can't comment. I've never seen it.
I shall move on to anxious-preoccupied.
Here we go.
Well, to be honest, I'm a combination, but anxious-preoccupied and fearful avoidant, but
Yeah.
get into it.
You're very anxious.
So, yeah, I am. So anxious-preoccupied is about 19% of the population. So we round up the 100, even though we have a fourth one that is not researched properly, so we don't have a percentage on that. So anyway, anxious-preoccupied is 19%. So what that means, anxious attachment style is a form of insecure attachment style marked by a deep fear of abandonment. So, me. Anxiously attached people tend to be very insecure about their relationships, often worrying that their partner will leave them, and thus always hungry for validation. I'm going to say that it not necessarily validation as we know it being, oh yeah, you're good enough or anything like that, more like I try to hide it, but we're still fishing for the partner to kind of say it out loud, that they love us, that they're not going to leave us.
Yeah, Petra's love language is literally affirmation of words.
Yeah.
So she constantly needs to hear.
Yeah.
To feel like she is loved.
Yes, I do.
So.
Exactly. So, hungry for validation. It's true. We have so many stories about this from the beginning of our relationship. Me crying by Tower Bridge. Now that's a story.
Yeah.
And then spilling beer all over myself.
Sipping Blue Moons.
Anxious attachment is also associated with neediness and clingy behavior, such as getting very anxious when your partner doesn't text back as fast enough and constantly feeling like your partner doesn't care enough about you.
This does sound like you.
Well, not about texting. Like, I'm fine with texting. No, I'm fine with texting.
When I was at Liverpool Way, and you're like, are you alive?
Yeah.
'Cause I had no internet.
Yeah, because I'm looking after the dogs while you're away watching bloody football.
Yeah.
It wasn't a strip club, what was it?
No, it's just a bar.
Yeah, with half naked girls. Anyway.
They weren't half naked, they were fully clothed dancing in a bar.
Debatable.
It was Coyote Ugly for you guys out there that know that bar.
Yeah. Anyway. My
yeah, exactly. It's coming out now.
There you go. So some points how we show things is overreaction to hurts, excess energy in the mornings, buzzing.
Yeah, at like 4 a.m. in the morning, Petra's like, she's had about 5 coffees and she's bounced off the walls.
That is literally not true.
It is.
I drink 1 coffee a day. I'm not up at 4 a.m. So he's just straight up lying.
Yeah, but you do get up at 5.
Yeah, we're not at 4.
You just talk constantly.
Oh, I do. I do talk.
Have you? I don't know. Just so I can explain it to you listeners. You know when you get woken up by a bird in the morning that just doesn't shut up.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, Petra's like the chirping outside.
Yeah.
She's just constant.
Yeah. And it doesn't stop. we have this podcast now.
Unfortunately.
We also have a difficulty in regulating emotion. All emotions go straight to maximum level. I got better in doing this. It used to be much, much worse. So there was no in between. There was no just like, oh, you know, benefit of the doubt. No. It was just like maximum and beyond. So you're lucky. Thanks, therapy. ADHD, which is interesting because I flagged this the other day, that I think I might
A
little bit. And anxiety and reassurance seeking. There is also high alert and high anxiety when in these situations. But then when calmed down and kind of talked through, it's really not that bad. As an example, I have issues, and I talked to you about this with because of my attachment style, but also my upbringing and my relationship with my mom. I have a big issue with you or anyone really that I'm attached to having fun without me. It's not because I don't want you to have fun, or if you would ask me to go with you, I'd be like, no, thank you, because I cannot be arsed. But at the same time, it's just like, oh, you're having...
That's so confusing.
It's really confusing, I know, and I'm really sorry about that. But basically, I feel left behind. And like you have like a life outside of me, which is absolutely fine because I have a life outside of you, and that's how it should be. But at the same time, I feel abandoned. But then when I actually calm down and I'm like, it's really not that big of a deal. Like I go out with my friends, it's absolutely fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is confusing, but
FOMO.
It's not FOMO because I don't want to be there. I could not care less
You do,
about...
and it goes off.
No. So yesterday, Scott was in Leeds.
Watching Chelsea win 3-0.
Yeah. Even if you would have asked, I was like, no thanks. Like, I could not be arsed going to Leeds to a Chelsea match.
Missed out. Didn't get to see Joey O'Hagan.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, Joey. Anyway, yeah, just in general, when I calm down in these situations, I'm like, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. But in those situations, my mind just goes to 100 and I just cannot snap out of it. Don't get me wrong, like it's not an abusive relationship or anything, like we're fine. It's just in my head, you know. It's majority of these things are in your head.
Yeah. Petra spends a lot of time with her thoughts.
And I think
so do I, to be fair, but in a different way.
Yeah. I also wrote down like it's often not even about the person on the other side, but the fear of abandonment. And it's not losing that exact person. It's about being left, being hurt, and being rejected. So, you know, I would be sad if I would lose you. But it's, you know, it would fucking suck if you would break up with me. So that's why I said, like, I feel like these people are often the people who would rather stay in an unhappy relationship until they fall in love with someone else, so they can just jump into something else because they just don't know how to be alone. Yeah. So we suck.
I wouldn't say you
used to be.
I was going to say now, I think you're okay. Right?
I would rather be single than just jump into another relationship.
You'd rather have your own sort of space.
That's why I say I'm not that anymore.
Not reliant, yeah.
But I used to be. I literally, throughout the years of like 2009 until 2014, I think, I was constantly in relationships from one after the other.
Bouncing around.
Because I just stayed in a relationship until I fell in love with someone else.
A lot, actually, you know, you say that. A lot of people still do that.
Yeah.
And I know, like, you see it all the time. Like, people just go from one to the other, and there's just like, how?
Yeah.
Like, you must not have, like, a lot of people question whether they love the first person to begin with.
Yeah.
But I think it's more what you just said, where I think it's that fear.
Yeah.
So they have to have someone else.
Yeah. And the thing is, like,
and that's how they
sort
of go from relationship to relationship. It's quite lonely.
And I don't think we necessarily are, like, I was never afraid of being alone per se. I never thought about it that way, but I was just like, why should I leave? Like, I'm fine. I'm not like, you know, unhappy nor happy, but I'm just like, fine. And I think these kind of people are also the people, as well as like avoidance, that would rather leave than being left. So just so that they don't have to go through the heartbreak and the rejection. So last but not least is fearful avoidant or disorganized. I don't have a percentage for this because it's not researched properly. But basically, disorganized attachment is a combination of avoidant and anxious attachment. Best of both worlds. And children that fit into this group often display intense anger and rage. They may break toys and behave in other like violent ways, and they also have difficult relationships with caregivers. Fearful avoidant attachment is rooted in a childhood in which at least one parent or caregiver exhibits frightening behavior. So this behavior can range from abuse to more subtle signs of anxiety or uncertainty, but the result is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that you have both parents, but basically one of them scares you. So whether it's abuse or just something like,
Just
for example,
angry reaction.
so let's say your parents are fighting all the time, and the dad is screaming and the mom is just obviously scared, so she doesn't scream back. Then you have this imbalance, and you just don't know how to deal with it.
Which is pretty scary for a youngster.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
A little baby.
Yeah, exactly. When the child approaches the parent for comfort, the parent is unable to provide it because the caregiver does not offer a secure base and may function as a source of distress for the child. The child's impulse will be to start to approach the caregiver for comfort, but will then withdraw. So, for example, let's say, again, I'm going to go back to the same example with the child crying. Let's say they've seen their dad screaming at the mum, and then, the child hurts itself and they want attention from the dad, but they've seen this behavior. So they need their attention, but at the same time they are afraid. Mm-hmm. So they would try to approach them, but then they would withdraw. So I think that would be one example. So people who have been in this kind of situation, they end up growing up doing exactly the same in interpersonal relationships. So basically they approach but then withdraw and so on.
Mm-hmm. So is that, sorry, just so myself and some of the listeners might bring this question up, is that a sort of, if you're on the dating scene and you sort of set up a date and then constantly withdraw?
I think that will be one step further already.
Right. Okay.
So I think it's all of these attachments are more in like a intimate setting, in a sense of like when you already have feelings for the person.
Right. Okay.
So,
makes sense.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's no surprise that I think this sort of stuff needs to be taught early on, because people, obviously, this is sort of the stuff that affects them growing up quite a lot, and this is why they behave the way they do, and it's all rooted from when they're babies, which is not their fault. So, and they're too young to be able to deal with it properly.
Yeah.
So I just don't know. I feel like maybe it's whether it's encouraging youngsters to go to therapy early or what, and be seen as a normal thing. Yeah. I think maybe that should.
Definitely.
And it's just a thought, and just based on some of the stuff you've just said.
Yeah, definitely. And I just kind of understanding why those things because these are essentially patterns that are just shown. It doesn't matter who you end up with, but I'm going to say you tend to end up with the same kind of person. If you have one of these attachments, and I'll explain exactly what I mean. But it's good to understand, because for the longest time, for example, me, I thought that I was just super jealous because for whatever reason, because I'm insecure, which, does stem from my attachment style. But I just thought I was just an insecure person. It was body image, whatever. I ended up just finding out that basically it is how I grew up with, what I grew up with, sorry. Because with the anxious-preoccupied, the issue was, so with the crying child, right? It would be, you cry and sometimes you get the attention, sometimes you don't. So let's say I cry as a child, I would cry for attention from my mom. Sometimes she would give it to me and soothe me. Sometimes she wouldn't. So I wouldn't know what to expect. So I would be super confused. Mm-hmm. So I would obviously try to do everything to get her attention. And it's just really chaotic. So
it sounds it.
Yeah, and it's really good to understand these things, because then there are some people with these, I guess, anything but secure attachment. They try to get this validation one way or another, or to try to get love somehow in their own way. Mm-hmm. And when they don't get it from the other person, which again I'm going to get into in the anxious avoidant combination, they push even more. So it's just a mess. It's just a whole fucking mess. But yeah, that's about it for the attachment styles. And I wrote where things get interesting. Is 2 points on this. So I have the anxious avoidant dance, which is pulling pushing. So basically it's a combination of in a relationship of 2 people. So one would be an anxious preoccupied and the other one would be
Mixed
an avoidant.
signals.
Yeah,
Sort of.
ish. So basically what happens is I wrote down like a timeline basically. So what would happen is first the anxious person is playing it cool, adapting to the other person. So the avoidant thinks, yeah, cool, like just casual, you know, nothing too, like no pressure. But then the anxious person starts showing their needs and basically they want attention and affection.
Yeah.
Which freaks the avoidant out. They pull back,
Yeah.
which then freaks the anxious person out.
God.
And they start being even more clingy, hoping for validation and reassurance. The person won't leave them because they already feel the signs of the other person leaving. But the more they push, the more the avoidant person pulls back. Their needs are never met by the avoidant. No reassurance, nada. Nada. So the anxious person...
Classic down with the kids, Petra.
Exactly. So the anxious person then starts the healing process. So they try to move on, which then brings the avoidant back because the anxious person is what they were kind of in love or what they liked in the beginning. So the avoidant comes back being just like, oh yeah, finally they're like the cool person again, you know. So it just starts again. So
it's a vicious cycle.
Exactly, because that's the type of person the avoidant liked, right? So it just starts all over again, over and over and over again.
God, I can't imagine being that attachment style. It seems exhausting.
Yeah. Oh, it's so exhausting. It's so exhausting. I've been in the anxious avoidant dance and God, I went to therapy after that. That's the first time I went to therapy. So it's exhausting and it's really hard to manage because it's a lot of like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and just like you never know what you're gonna get at all. So it's
so say if someone was an avoidant or an anxious, how can they change? Therapy
for sure. So I'm sure there are multiple ways, but 2 ways would be on their own, so therapy and just really healing and understanding all of these things and changing throughout time. So basically they learn to be okay on their own,
understand themselves basically, and it's like a journey of self-dependence.
Yeah, we all want to be secure. We do.
Yeah.
So that would be one way. The other way would be kind of being with someone in a relationship that is secure. So for example, I think we have this dynamic that you're secure, I'm anxious, and your secure rubs off on me because you don't shy away from showing emotions, showing affection. So you reassure me, you validate me. So then I become more calm and just like take it on and be like secure. So my attachment can change into being insecure.
I've got anxiety in other areas.
Yeah.
Which we'll find out in future episodes.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing, so it's okay.
It's not.
So that could be. However, those people with any other attachment style than secure, before they turn secure, basically, can easily slip back into their old attachment style. It's never really completely gone. And more often than not, secure stays secure because if there's drama, they're like, peace, I'm out.
Yeah.
You know, and they just leave.
It's that time of the episode where we need to get a pet talk.
Oh God, I did not bring one, so I need to think of my...
Oh, she's let the team down.
Oh God, okay, no pressure. Okay, listen. I think when you're anything but secure, you tend to see the relationship or the other person in the relationship or people, no judging, as your better half, your other half, right? Because if you're avoidant, you think you're not lovable, so the other person must be better. If you're anxious, then you love them so much that you think they're better. So you have to stop thinking about them as the other half, the better half. That's not true. You're a whole person. They are a whole person, and you just come together to be just 2 people or multiple. Again, no judgment. We love you all. Exactly, they add something to your life, but it doesn't mean they complete you. You don't need them to complete you. They don't need you to complete them.
They are the fries to your burger.
No.
Oh.
You are a
I
whole
thought that was the
meal.
add-on.
No, you are a whole meal. They would be the
sauce.
They would be the McFlurry, the addition.
Normally doesn't work, but when it does, it's brilliant.
Exactly, like relationships. Yeah. Majority of relationships in your life probably, not work, because otherwise you would probably not be with multiple people for your life. So exactly. So you are your whole damn meal, not just a snack. You're a whole meal.
You're a whole Big Mac meal.
You're a whole
with
meal.
chili cheese bites and a McFlurry.
Like Lizzo would say, "It's bad bitch o'clock. It's thick fatty."
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but I think we're going to wrap it up there.
So that's your pet talk. Again, if there's any questions, listen, I'm going to be like the proper podcaster now. I'm going to leave some links in the show notes. There's a whole book on attachment styles called Attached. It's really boring. I wouldn't recommend. Only if you're like really into, because it's it's not a light read. It's proper like psychological stuff.
Yeah, proper Oxford Dictionary material.
Sure. But still, the book exists, and there is also a website, well, multiple of them, but there is a website with where you can do a quiz to find out what your attachment style is, and believe me, it will explain so much.
So yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. We'll be back next week where I will take the mic and go through one of the topics that has been harassing me for my whole life. We'll see you soon. Peace out.
Bye.